Burger King, what's it called? Pinkberry, Icy Cup, Doman, all of that. And like quite the expansive bill for itself.
It's, to succeed here is orders of magnitude. It's hell. To set up one BK store, you need about $1 million, right? From construction to working capital. It's about $1 million. Whereas in the US, you probably need maybe 50K of your own cash. We had negotiated a deal, Richard and I really negotiated a deal to bring in an investor. I'm not going to mention the names, but a very well-known company, actually, a very well-known firm, to invest $30 million to open, a bunch of BKs, Once the currency did that, boom, they pulled out. We're not any different from the guys in the States. We have the same aspirations. You have the same aspirations as the guy who went to Harvard, who went to MIT. You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to add value. But the systems, it just doesn't work in your favor. One of my biggest mistakes is not having a white partner. That's a connected Ghanaian from an elite family. You, a white person who's ever been to Ghana, would have had a better chance. Therein lies the problem.
Why is that so?
How do we improve access to capital to young people to be on their own? How do we expand their borders, right? And for me, one of the things that I really see that can really help, really help young folks doing business, especially folks like you, is
so the conversation you're about to listen to is the conversation we had with Dr. Kobbina Awuah. So Dr. Kobbina Awuah is like the founder of Peak Investments Capital, currently Current Peak Holdings. They more or less are the pioneers of entrepreneurship through acquisition. So essentially, a fund that acquires businesses, props the businesses up, operates the businesses, and makes them, more profitable in this country. They have an expanse across Eastern African countries. They're doing some work in Europe, financial services. Some of the really popular franchises we know of, Burger King, Pinkberry. They're behind all that. And it was a really great conversation, just sharing his journey from Kumasi to Cornell and Harvard, and coming back to the continent, his perspective on the African continent, and what it means to be an entrepreneur, an African entrepreneur, all the challenges that comes with, and the prospects that lies ahead. So it was a great conversation. It's a great conversation. And personally for me, I think I shared on the conversation that he represents for me probably like a future self, because we are particularly excited about the same kind of businesses and ventures. And so for me it was like sitting in front of a guru who has charted the path you want to chart. That said, before you go into the conversation, I want to read this poem by Charles Bukowski with you. It's called Go All the Way. So it goes like this: if you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. This could even mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, and maybe your mind. It could mean not eating for 3 days, 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision. It could mean mockery, isolation. Isolation is a gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you will do it, despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You'll be alone with the gods, and nights will flame with fire. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Kobe, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
As I was telling before, your coming here seems a little fated. So like in February this year, we just started releasing our episodes. So this random lady reaches out to me on LinkedIn and says, there's this strand of entrepreneurship I think you should consider and exploring and getting people to talk about entrepreneurship through acquisition. And she knows of Harvard alumnus who seems to be thriving in that space in Ghana, and we should try and connect. But then I hadn't really met. There was no way I was going to reach you. I didn't have any connection. And then I started to have a month later. I connected with Mr. Mensah, and then he made the introduction. And while I was spending time reading about you, I was reading about Bill Ackman
Okay.
of Pershing Square. Similar model. What you've done with Crown Peak Holdings, previously Peak Investment Capital, 16 African countries, expands from financial services to food and beverages. So the reason we have Burger King, what's it called? Pinkberry, Icy Cup. You have no idea what you did for me with Icy Cup. I'll tell you about it later. Icy Cup, what's it called? What's this one? Doman, all of that. And like quite the expanse you built for yourself, right? And so I'm really, really looking forward to how this conversation is going to unfold.
Yeah, should be exciting.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So that's my overview of what I think Crown Peak Holdings is. A holding company with all these expanse, financial services, food and beverages, credits, real estate. You're present in 60 African countries. You're in Europe as well, in North America as well. Yeah. What's it about? What's the goal? What are you trying to do?
I mean, I think the goal is to create, a very diversified business portfolio in Africa, primarily. I mean, the stuff that you see in the West is to give us some extra cushion, because Africa in general is quite risky. But I think once you have a more geographically diversified portfolio, it helps. So the primary goal is to build, a Pan-African diversified portfolio that can withstand any shocks. Yeah, because there are a lot of shocks. I mean, we saw one in, was it 2022? Yeah, with the CD in Ghana. If we didn't have businesses in other countries, we would have been screwed.
Interesting. When you mentioned Pan-African, let me tell you what my AI assistant told me about you. Like, I was feeding the data to give me a summary of who you are, and let me read it to you. Kobbina Awuah has a rare blend of elite academic training, real entrepreneurship, and Pan-African investment work. Yeah, that's what my AI model said about you.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, anyway, so with Peak, what's the BT and the word Peak actually? Because when you're in college, I gather you started Peak Infotech.
Yeah. It's just, it's a very aspirational, name. And if you look at the logo, at least when I was in college, the way I was thinking about it is, there's a blue base and there's a golden top, right? So the crown peak is really gold. And the blue base stands for resources, right? So human resource, financial resource, and that leads to the gold.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of like the idea behind it. Yeah.
Nice. Talking about college, you went to Cornell.
Yeah.
Studied engineering.
Yeah.
And after Cornell, you did your MBA with Harvard. And from Harvard, you went to University of Zurich, did a PhD in economics, right?
Yeah.
Your thesis was on behavior, on the perspective on economic behavior or something like that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, so my interest in economics, I mean, I can give you a sort of an overview of my educational route. So at Cornell, I did engineering. So it was undergrad and master's. And I was...
What engineering?
Mechanical. I was mechie. So when I went to school in the States, the plan was to work for NASA. There was a summer that I had an internship with one of these very well-known NASA labs. And, I was like, wow, my goodness, this type of research, I mean, you meet somebody who's been doing the same research for 30 years. I was like, this thing, you're not going to make an impact. You'll be 60 and, you would have done the same research. It was just too boring for me. So at that time, Ghana had also discovered oil. So it was quite exciting, 08, 09. So I decided to
join Konoko.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So, you're almost done with school and, you decided that NASA is not the route for you. So at this point, you're a bit confused. So it's okay. I mean, what should I do? Oh, Ghana has discovered oil. Maybe I work for an oil company and then I figure it out. So my mother, Professor Siwa,
Okay.
did she teach you?
No, she didn't.
No. Okay, because she teaches all the first year students.
Mhm.
At that time, she had been made a vice chancellor at that university in
Yeah.
Sunyani.
University of Education. Energy and Natural Resources.
Yeah, yeah. So I got bored with the work that I was doing. It's like, this is not really for me. And my mother had just been made.
Wait, you got bored working with Konoko?
Yeah.
But it's like a really great company, oil and gas.
Yeah, but it's boring. I mean, it's the same shit you do every day. So I got really tired quickly, and I told my mother. My mother was like, "Oh, I've been made a VC." I said, I'm gonna come and help you. Think through programs, internships, try to structure a few things with some companies, get some guest lectures from, based on my background from the industry, from universities outside to come in and teach. And so I did that for about a year or so. And during that time, I had gotten admitted into HBS and HLS. And so I just decided to go and start with the business school. Yeah.
Okay. So you hadn't started the fund yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
You're talking about your mom. I realize there's a huge influence of your parents on you, more or less, because your dad went to Cornell too.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you go to Cornell because your dad went to Cornell?
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, I got into some really tough schools as well, and I showed him the option, and he's like, "Hey, listen, if you want to make me happy, this is where you have to go," right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So,
Were you raised in Ghana?
yeah. I was born in the States, but I was raised in Kumasi.
Okay.
Kumasi boy.
Interesting. So I think in 2014, that's when you started PIT.
Yeah, 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to. You guys have done a great work. Your journey has been exciting with like peak investment capital, and there are a few blocks I want to like really go into detail on your work with how you got Icy Cup that deal with KNUST in 2015, right? How that went, the modalities of that deal, and then probably take on the journey with what you did with Pinkberry. Yeah. So let's start with Icy Cup, 2015.
Right.
What you done? You're done business school. You
Yeah,
finished
so I just went
2015.
done with business school.
Okay.
I'm looking at, look, how can I get into the entrepreneurship space? How can I add value
Yeah.
to Ghana? You were a tech boy, so you were there when you saw that
Yeah.
transition. Exactly. So, how can you add value? And I brought together a pool of investors to take over and really add value. And the value was, I mean, there are a bunch of issues with a business model um, where the government is involved. African governments can be a bit they have different incentives than what we business people have.
Yeah.
Right. So you're bound to have some kind of conflict, and it's not optimal um, from a return standpoint. So I'm not going to get into those details, but for those who were at KNUST at that time, I mean, you were at KNUST.
Yeah.
You saw the impact. It was immediate, and that's kind of how I've been thinking about business for the past 10 years. It's
Impact.
yeah, how to transform and almost immediate.
Okay.
Um, and that's very key. So for businesses that would take forever, it's not really.
Yes.
Africa is really risky. This play where you're 10 years without making any money. Stuff that works in the West, but here, given the amount of risk you have, it tilts investors into a more
Traditional.
yeah, traditional approach. Cash flow. It's a cash flow driven market, and it's gonna be like that for a very long time. I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah, but when you were, now I want to understand what because there's like you've lived, what was it called? At that point, before you went to business school or you left Konoko, the typical African parent's dream for a son. You went to an Ivy League school, did your master's engineering, and now you're working with like a top firm, oil and gas firm, making good money. What really pushed you? I mean, you said you were bored, right? But then I get to realize that when you were in college, you started a business. Did you have like some early pinnings or like encounters with entrepreneurship as a thing where your parents, I mean, yeah, I know that your parents are academics. Your dad is like a plant pathologist.
Yeah.
Mom is a sanitation expert.
Yeah, she's
Like
a civil PhD in civil engineering.
engineering, exactly. And so with that kind of influence, if people would expect that you also be like very traditional, probably academic. And you're an academic actually, funny enough.
Yeah.
And so what nudged you to leave your job at Konoko and say, I want to venture out and do something on my own?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Hello, friends. So sorry to interrupt you. I know you're enjoying this conversation, and I'm so sorry about rudely interrupting you. But then it's come to our attention that about 82% of you guys who consume our content have not subscribed. Your subscription goes a long way to help us and encourages us as a team to keep bringing you what we bring you every week. So just do us a little favor. Hit the subscribe button, share, and if possible, comment. Thank you.
I mean, it's once you get a feeling that it's so and a lot of folks that like myself that moved back to Africa will tell you the same thing. The feeling of if you're in the US is very stable. I was earning six figures when I was 21. With like you said, an oil company. Then it was a shitload of money. Back then. I mean, six figures in what 09, 2010. It's probably like earning like 300K now with all this inflation and salary. So it was a lot of money then for a 21-year-old. Parents were super excited. But, you just realize it's just so routine. It's the same thing. It's nothing really exciting. And as an African, you also want to try and make an impact, home. Bring whatever you've learned, back home. Try to do something a bit innovative. So that was 8 years. That's all I was thinking about is how can I do something innovative? And talking about my parents being academics, I mean, my dad, my dad at my graduation is like, the guy's like, listen, yeah, it's Harvard, it's fine, but it's not a PhD. I did my PhD because of my parents. That's really it. Which is, I don't think is a good incentive for anyone. But in Africa, you are not an island, right? So
there are stakeholders.
Exactly, and this is what I think is very, very important to understand. What your parents say is important. You might not believe in what they're saying, but you're not an island to yourself. And I mean, my dad was super. I mean, I've never seen him happy when I was doing my PhD defense. The guy was so excited. More than when I graduated from Cornell and I graduated from Harvard. It didn't really mean much to him. So as economists will say, it gives you some kind of utility also.
That makes me curious. Or kind of that bringing you hard. I know your mom. I mean, with your mom's career, she taught at KNUST, UCC, all of that. Were you moving around a lot when you're growing up in Ghana? How was growing up like? Do you have siblings? I know you have a brother.
Yeah, I have an older brother. We're just two boys.
Two boys. Okay. How was that like?
I mean, for the most part, I mean, both parents were teaching at KNUST. So I grew up as a campus kid, back then it was a very small community. It's not like what it is now. It's a very small community where, everybody's kids went to the same school. You go to KNUST Primary, KNUST JSS, and, you go to one of the top secondary schools in Ghana, whether it's Opokwari, Prempeh, Presec, whatever, So that was sort of, I went to Opokwari. So that's sort of, was the progression that everybody did. My brother, the reason why I went to Opokwari is because my older brother went to Opokwari. So, I had to go there. So that's kind of how it was. I mean, I grew up, and then after Opokwari, I went to the States.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. All right. So now we are back to you're now at Harvard Business School. You want to do something innovative. You decided, well, I'm going to start a search fund to acquire small businesses and operate them, make them better. right? And you decide to build off of your upbringing and like the environment you grew up in KNUST, you find the opportunity with Icy Cup, right? Walk us through that deal.
Yeah.
I know
So
there was like a $200,000.
yeah,
Yeah.
roughly.
How did you raise that money? How did you structure that deal?
So it was mostly through F&F. I mean, the problem with entrepreneurship through acquisition in Africa is that, especially then, maybe it's changed now. I mean, I I don't think there's been a lot of successes with people acquiring using this particular model. So what happens is, first of all, people are not willing to sell, not
Yeah.
entirely. We're still stuck in that mindset that you die with your business type of thing. So people are not willing to sell. And if they're willing to sell, it's it has to be a business that is doing so bad. Why would I let go of my business? It has to be a business that's doing so bad. I mean, losing money, and then it doesn't become it doesn't become interesting for any investor, because transforming the business,
Will take a lot.
yeah, especially in Africa, here you won't have access to credit. No bank is going to give you a loan, right? Unlike the US, where you borrow, can even borrow and buy the company, right? Here, none of that. Our banks are really, really terrible. So it's a very, very different dynamic. And so, you need external investors that really understand sort of like a long-term play. Uh, KNUST Yogurt, which was what it was called then, was one of those companies that I knew growing up as a kid. And the company was losing a lot of money. Every year. I think the university had to support the operations every year. Yeah, so, I can't discuss some of these things here, but we understood that once we took over, it could be like a switch.
Yeah.
So we were very convinced that we could put in the right systems to make sure that it becomes a transformational
Business.
investment. So that's what we did.
I know you took 55%.
Yeah, we took we got a majority deal. I mean, just so that you can have control to implement your vision. So that's kind of what we did with Icy Cup. And you were a student when I think 2016.
Yeah, I was telling you that I have a story to tell you about Icy Cup. I think the first time I ever went to any form of dates, any date.
You went to Icy Cup.
Yeah, I went to Icy Cup.
Yeah. That's good.
I think all the tech boys around that time were test. Yeah, and for me, I think my what interests me is like how you're able to raise a capital for it, right? And even with your other subsequent acquisitions and businesses, maybe we come to all that. So with Icy Cup, with the $200,000 you raised, you basically did family and friends. I know there was this story that suggests that you raised from like a friend at Konoko.
Yeah,
You worked
there's
at
a conical. Folks that I knew.
Yeah.
That I was very
How did
close.
you manage to convince them to you?
I think you're betting on the individual, not
Yeah.
necessarily
It's true.
the country, because these people don't understand Africa.
Yeah.
So yeah, and my the professor for the ETA class always says success begets success, right? So once you sort of close the first deal, you establish credibility. The next one I think was Pinkberry.
Pinkberry, yeah.
I mean, I had the first Pinkberry when I was a student at
Ghana.
HBS. Yeah, I tasted. I was like, wow, this would do quite well, because the Ghanaians like tart,
Yeah.
like fine yogurt. We don't necessarily like sweet things. Like, yes, that's all. This thing would do quite well in Ghana. I sent them an email, they didn't respond. I was harassing them with emails. So this was the time I was at HBS. And I still have let me see if I can find it. I still have the first email that I sent to them. The first day we launched that Icy Cup store, a commercial area.
Mm-hmm.
I took pictures and I said, guys, this is what we've been able to do. And I got a response. I'm sure I can find that email. And then I got a response like,
Yeah.
and then Aaron, who is the owner of Pinkberry, is like, hey, let's have a call. So I had a call with them, and the rest is history.
So there's an interesting bit about that Pinkberry transaction.
Yeah,
So what you did was that you needed $50,000.
yeah. To launch,
The
it could have been more, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think about three
and
to
so
four.
at that time, what you did was you used the cash flow,
Yeah,
first time
yeah,
capital,
yeah.
to
Exactly.
get
Dividends. Yeah.
dividend, and then you got a vendor notes,
Yes.
and then the other parts, third parts.
You got a vendor note. So the vendor note was very crucial because of the equipment. Equipment was quite expensive. I mean,
Yeah,
then I think now one of those machines, those tailor machines, they cost like 50 grand now. I think then it was like maybe 25, 30 grand, but now that should be in the 50s. So you needed three of those, right? And doing business in Africa is such a pain. I mean, it's like ridiculous. You have to pay for. So if we didn't get this vendor note, it would have been a big problem for
from
us.
Pinkberry. Pinkberry gave you the vendor notes.
No, Pinkberry is not gonna give you any vendor note. The equipment supplier
Oh,
is the one that gave us a vendor because they had a branch in Ghana. This beautiful lady called I call her Auntie Winifred. She was very, very supportive in the very beginning. So she gave us the machines, and then we had to pay over time. And she was very, very supportive. So, well, for the rest, you have to pay up front. You have to order your Africa, man. You have to order your materials, pay everything even before it gets on the ship. So you're looking at about 5, 6 months of your cash just tied up with some company in Europe or the US to date, actually. To date. It's because whenever it's we don't extend these terms to companies in Africa. See, but if you're in the US, all of this is on credit. They give it to you on credit and you sell and you give them back their money. It's to succeed here is orders of magnitude. It's hell. I mean, to succeed as a franchisee, BKI, Burger King is the same thing.
yeah.
It's orders of magnitude. In the US, first of all, you get a bank loan to do everything. But even if you don't, there's vendor notes. The suppliers will give you credit. It's so easy. So instead of to set up one BK store, you need about $1 million, right? From construction, to working capital. It's about 1 million. Now we have 7. We're gonna add 13 this year. It's 13 BK stores this year. So we're probably gonna end the year around 20. That's sort of like the plan that the team is building on. But it's like $1 million USD. Whereas in the US, you probably need maybe 50K of your own cash to do it. It's orders of magnitude. It's a nightmare. When I say it's a nightmare, it's a
What
nightmare.
keeps you going? Why do you want to keep doing this?
Oh, it's exciting. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's you thrive in this craziness. It takes a special kind of person. It's a crazy landscape. So I always tell people, when I teach this case at HBS, I tell them that look, running like a company that does maybe $1 million revenue in Ghana is the equivalent of running a company that does maybe 100 million. I always use in the US. I always use this 100x sort of thing. The levels of complexity, the various touch points. The economy size is quite small. And so you realize that you're running quite a big business with different touch points, and the level of complexity for $1 million business is the same as the complexity, so maybe even more than $100 million business in the States. That's what I really believe in.
Yeah. How many Pinkberries? Okay, so now I know there's a point where I thought, what's it called? The Quick Angels. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know they're back Chicken Man Pizza Man. Do there's a partnership with Chicken Man Pizza Man now with Pinkberry?
Yes, as well. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
And
How's
I
that
think
dynamic?
no, it's going quite well. I think that's how we were really able to
Scales.
to scale. Yeah, I mean, without that, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare doing. You're not gonna get bank financing.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get capital from anywhere, and these are even established brands. It is very, very difficult as a Black African to raise capital. It is very, very difficult. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. So, but like I said, as you scale, there's a lot of strength in scaling. So as you scale, things become a bit easier to do. It's still very difficult. I mean, as I say, it's still quite difficult, but it becomes a bit easier to do. And I think the relationship with Richard and the partnership with Richard really
Yeah.
helped with this sort of scaling. And also with BK as well. It was very, very instrumental because,
How did that happen? The Burger King conversation. How did that
you
start?
know, with same, with Pinkberry, I mean, there are a lot of brands that will reach out to you. I mean, I don't think there's any in West Africa here. I don't think there's anyone that has more restaurant chains than this group. The quick food group.
Okay.
I don't think anybody. So if Western brands want to come in, just okay, who is the one of Pinkberry, right? Which company owns Pinkberry? They'll reach out to you. So that's how the BK thing came about. I mean,
Okay.
they're like, we need somebody to take the brand to another level. There are a few players to talk to,
Yeah.
maybe two players in the country. And so that's where we got involved. And it's been doing quite well so far. I mean, BK is a solid brand in
Yeah.
Ghana, I think.
So now what's it called? Peak Investment Capital is now Crown Peak Holdings, right? I mean, now we've highlighted your journey with like the food and beverages part, and you have presence in 16 African countries, and predominantly it's on your financial services business, which is all your credits.
Right.
If you want to, how did that start? When did that come in the picture? I know there's a partnership going with Mr. Richard.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. How did that start?
Exactly. So, Richard is a fantastic entrepreneur, fantastic investor. I mean, the guy's appetite for risk and execution, I've never seen anything like that in my life, So I'll give you an example as I go on this journey. I think it might have been 2019, we were in Tanzania. Just vacationing and you know, the idea of introducing same product that has worked so well for him in Ghana into the Tanzanian market came up, and we just put things in place. And then in 2020, it was March of 2020. I remember this day very well. The world was about to shut down. There was COVID. Da da da. So I was in Switzerland then. Um, I flew into before the border shut. Tanzania, fortunately, never shut down.
Oh,
So I flew into Tanzania, and then we worked on setting up uh, a version of quick credit in Tanzania. So I was there setting it up, and so June of 2020, right? This was when um, COVID was destroying every business that you could think of. I mean, Pinkberry was going through the drain. I mean, there was really no money. Companies were, in Ghana, I guess nobody really goes bankrupt, but companies were shutting down.
yeah, nobody was using the service.
Yeah. So, and now, so here I'm in Tanzania. It's June 2020, and we're about to launch this microfinance. We're about to give people money in the midst of COVID. Nobody on this continent, as of June 2020, was giving out money. I call Richard. I'm like, you think, is this a good idea? He's like, Kobe, when nobody is doing it, it's actually the time you have to double down.
Wow.
So we need to push money into this market. and the rest is history. We were the only ones. For about a whole year in Tanzania, we were the only ones landing. And
You guys are doing like about $5 million weekly to businesses.
yeah. Like
And that's
in
intense.
loans. Yeah. So, even in Tanzania, like our, the local directors, they will call me and they're like, man, I think you guys are making a big mistake. This is not Ghana. This is Tanzania. It's a different market. Which is like, he wouldn't have any. And I'm trying to also convince him. Listen, I think this is actually crazy. He said, no, 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 no. Bobby, let's push out the money. Let's push out the money. This is when people are not investing. Push it out, and the rest is history. I mean, you know, COVID. I mean, Tanzania also never really shut down, but businesses were really struggling, right? But because we were the only ones lending, there was significant demand, and
Yeah.
we were able to really push out a lot of money into that market. So it ended up doing extremely well.
I see.
Uh,
The so now Crown Peak. So what was the role of Crown Peak in that like transaction? That
it's just a holding business, right?
okay.
It's a holding company, so it has shareholders that
Okay.
holds stakes in all
In
these
that
assets. Yeah,
right.
yeah, just a holding business. Yeah.
And how many countries now?
So we should be in about 16. We're going to end the year
Okay.
because there are different. We have different place also. So we're going to end the year probably in about 25. So maybe an extra 9, 10 companies. Yeah.
Having touched like that kind of experience, have kind of Pan African perspective on like doing business in Ghana. You are doing you're being in Africa. You are an entrepreneur yourself. You're empowering entrepreneurs in the market again on the African continent, and you've admitted over this conversation how extremely difficult it is, right, to build business in Africa, to be an entrepreneur in this market. What I'm a young entrepreneur, right? I'm in my 20s, just started out building a business. With that kind of perspective on the African continent, even though I'm highly optimistic about the prospect of the continent economically speaking, you have taken the leaps and taken the steps
Mhm.
and seen all the landmines. What would you tell me?
I think, look, uh, I think you should be very passionate about it. I mean, not every business that we did has worked, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there's one that's currently failing. It's just unfortunate, but you have to be very passionate about it, and because it's a very tough environment. It's a very, very tough environment. You have to be very, very passionate about it, and I think the passion, once if you're very passionate about something, you fail, you try again, da da da. If it works very well. You move on to the next thing, right? You have to be very, very passionate about entrepreneurship in general, and you have to think about how to raise capital, right? Because in a lot of cases, we you come across a bunch of entrepreneurs that will ask you for money, and they're trying to use this Western style approach with crazy valuations. I mean, there's so many ridiculous stories we hear on the daily. Yeah, somebody will come with an idea and he's like, a company is valued at $10 million. In this country, $10 million. I mean, it's crazy. So I think entrepreneurs need to really think about how to raise money.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a lot. And the Western playbook doesn't really work for traditional investors unless you get this Western money. And they raise money, so there a lot of for instance, like 2 years ago, a lot of fintechs on the continent went bust. In Ghana here, we saw so many fraud cases,
Yeah.
which you are very well aware of. But our fintech is still going on because for us, the model is fine tuned in such a way that you make money from day one. You have to, in order to survive. You have to make money from day
Yeah.
one. You can't afford to be living on somebody's borrowed money for 10 years. On this continent, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, I can give you so many examples. When the city was it 2022, it was October. I remember this so well. I was in the US when this happened. when the city, went from like 6 to whatever 10 in like a space of a week. It was just some very short period. So we were we had negotiated a deal. Richard and I negotiated a deal to bring in an investor. I'm not going to mention the names, but a very well-known company, actually, a very well-known firm, to invest $30 million to open, a bunch of BKs, a bunch of Burger Kings. Once the currency did that, boom, I mean, they pulled out. So we had planned the whole year, waiting for this transaction to happen. And in October, they had to pull out. I remember this very well. So it's no, it's very challenging. So
In instances like that, what do you do?
yeah, you cry small, you pray small, and then you're back on the grind. It's okay to cry. I was very upset. I mean, but actually, I remember that day very well. I was there with Richard and my cousin Twee.
Yeah.
We're in DC together. Then we got the news. Yeah, we got an email, and they're not gonna continue given the currency risk. So bad news, but we decided to double down and do it ourselves anyway. I mean, and Richard was the one who was like, screw it. I mean, we can do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. So let's do it. So that's kind of like the spirit that you need to have, right? It's like, okay, bad news. So we've been doing it ourselves. Let's do it. That's kind of like the spirit.
Yeah. Another thing I think I'm particularly interested in, I mean, because for me, as an entrepreneur, I'm very, I was telling you the last time we were talking that there's a certain mirror of you I have, of myself. I see in you, uh, particularly because we're interested in about the same lines of businesses to do on this continent. We have probably the same perception of how to do business on this continent. Brick and mortar approach, selling money to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Selling money is probably the easiest thing you can do.
Yes. Yeah. So, but then there's something. So, where one of my primary engagements at the Dara, we provide credits to tenants. Asset back credit, more or less. We try to be like the cars as well, but we're doing like real estate and rental space. Um, there's a certain difficulty running a credit business in like a heavily informal credit market like ours. Right, because there's no data to show that this person can actually pay the money. Even if the data shows the instruments of recollections are very weak, so you have to. How have you navigated that credit space?
Yeah.
Yes, because
Yeah.
you guys are lending to you're touching the space where the banks are scared to touch the heavily
Yeah.
informal market.
Yeah.
And
I
you're
mean,
not,
Ghana, crowd, you say Ghana, you have data. I mean, in other countries, I'm not gonna mention some of the African countries we're in. Oh, my goodness, I mean, people don't even have ID cards, right? So you're lending to somebody without an ID card. But I think without sort of giving out the sweet sauce that makes this work, I think um, we have a way of doing our own KYCs, which enables you to map out the demographic where the person is situated at any given point in time. And that's something that, you know, the traditional banks have not been able to crack, and we've been able to crack that. And so that's how our default rates is, can in these other African markets can be quite low, and you can ensure your payments.
yeah.
That's the only way. I mean, is Africa, as you said, heavily informal. That's why nobody plays in that space. You won't give money to somebody who doesn't have an ID card, but we do in certain African countries.
When you were talking, you said when I asked you about why you decided to leave um, ConocoPhillips to come back to Ghana, you said something about how, as an African, there's an element of trying to be an instrument of change and impact, right? Um, how has that pursuit gone for you? Impact pursuits, right? And then the second I want to ask is that is there a form of legacy you were trying to build? You know, that if we mention Kobbina Awuah in 50 years, what you want to be remembered for? You understand me? Yeah. So it's in twofold. How is that optimism you have about the African continent and like the kind of impact you can make years ago, fresh off like you abandon your career, which is right, which was ripe at the time, to come and do what you're doing.
Yeah.
How has that been for you?
Yeah. I mean, the optimism dies quite fast once you come into the continent. Anyone that tells you otherwise is lying. Once you get here, I mean, I have so many stories I can't say on tape. Maybe once you get here, you quickly realize that my goodness, it's a mess. One of the questions that I'll get back to your question, but when I'm teaching this class at Harvard, the students ask, "Oh, the reason why it's worked for you is because were raised in Ghana. You're Ghanaian and da da da. You have the network, da da da. That's why it's worked for you. But for us, and this usually will come from a white person saying that that's actually one of my biggest mistakes is not having a white partner. And then you asking me that question, you have a better chance. If you had gone through the same steps that I did in Ghana, you would have had a much better chance than I did. As a connected Ghanaian from an elite family, you, a white person who's ever been to Ghana, would have had a better chance. Therein lies the problem.
Why is that so?
I mean, it's so for several reasons, which you know yourself, right? There's a lot of white privilege on this continent.
Capital wise.
Yeah, bringing capital. No, even trust.
Yes.
Trust. Your fellow black man is gonna see a white dude, and they're gonna connect, and they'll have more trust than your black ass.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And so therein lies a problem. And once you get into the continent, you realize that you realize that you're not gonna be able to get credit from anybody. That you're on your own. And then you realize, my goodness, we are really, really doomed in a very, very serious way, right? Access to capital, I think, is what hinders the dreams of millions of Africans. We're not any different from the guys in the States. We have the same aspirations. You have the same aspirations as the guy who went to Harvard, who went to MIT. You want to be an entrepreneur. You want to add value. But the systems, it doesn't work in your favor. We all have the same aspirations. Everybody wants to succeed as a human being. You want to improve the quality of your life. You want to improve the quality of the life of your employees. But the systems just doesn't allow it. And then so once you come in and you quickly realize, like, oh shit. So now, do you go back or do you stay? And I have a lot of my classmates came back. A lot of them have gone back. When Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, South Africa is a bit developed, so they don't face the same issues that we face, although they have their own issues.
Yeah.
So a lot of people come, they realize they can't crack it, and they go. But you have to be persistent, and you have to figure out a way to do it. Persistence, being opportunistic, in terms of deals. I think that's the sweet sauce. That's how it goes.
And what you want to be remembered for? 50 years. So I see Kobbina Awuah. What you want to be remembered for?
Just the guy that builds sustainable business that can last generations. I think that's the most important thing for me. Employ people, build sustainable business that can last. Outlive you. So that's kind of what I'm doing on the continent, and that's what I'll be doing over the next couple of years.
In parts, there's this heavy, what's it called, conversation around the fact that government is like and policy, like a big way to influence any form of tangible change in the economic narrative on this continent, right? What do you think about that? And do you think it's something you're trying to make a play? Is that like an area you're trying to make a play in?
Right. No, obviously. I think for those that have been able to succeed a bit in business in Africa, you can't sort of government and business goes a bit more hand in hand,
Yeah.
than say the West, right? And policies here actually really do matter. Um, and I think, the various governments have tried. And when I'm not even talking from a Ghana standpoint. Ghana, we all know the issues that, we have in the country at the moment. But various governments have tried, how do we empower young people? Um, how do we improve access to capital, to young people to be on their own? How do we expand their borders, right? And for me, one of the things that I really see that can really help, uh, you know, really help young folks doing business, especially folks like you, is, we should realize that Africa, although it's, we have different countries, there shouldn't be any reason why you cannot expand beyond your borders of Ghana and do business elsewhere. Um, you know, we are connected in that sense, and I think for younger folks who are a bit educated, of course, the messaging is a bit different. Is that you need to also start to look beyond Ghana.
Yeah, got it.
There's and this is speaking to a Ghanaian audience, right? There's this perception of Ghanaian excellence. Have you traveled around a bit on the
Yeah.
continent? Okay, have you been to a few countries?
To Africa and
Where? Nigeria?
Togo
Okay.
and the Ivory Coast.
Because it's quite nice. This perception of Ghanaian excellence. Look, Nkrumah wabo brought to you. Nkrumah gave us a very good reputation on this continent. That makes it a lot easier. I mean, we just set up a company in Malawi, and I mean the guys, like, oh, you Ghanaians, you're just great. And we don't see ourselves as great, but there's this perception of Ghanaian excellence, which I think has really helped us in doing business outside Ghana. And I think young people should start to take advantage of this sort of opportunity. Africa is for us. They're I met one of my classmates from HBS whom I didn't even know was living in Ghana, who's doing extremely well. Not Ghanaian, he's a white American. He's left the US to come to Ghana and he's doing super well in this. I'm so proud of him, so happy for him. What prevents you from going to Togo? The white guy has left US, moved here with his partner, is having a great business. And you are sitting in Ghana and, you don't want to go to another country. So I think folks need to understand that, Africa is it's a much bigger place and there's a lot of opportunities within special markets. I mean, when I go to Liberia, I see a lot of Ghanaians that are doing amazing in Liberia and in Sierra Leone. Amazing. In Mali, amazing. Tanzania, fantastic. Kenya, Uganda. So there's this notion of Ghanaian excellence, which I think should be encouraged.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah.
It's definitely not easy. You face the same structural challenges, but there's this notion of Ghanaian excellence, which I think a lot of Ghanaians don't know about. That they can use to succeed in markets in uncharted territories. That their parents didn't have an advantage to. I mean, I'm sure you know people from Zambia. People from Zambia, Tech, Congo. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure your parents didn't know these people, right? So the world is opening up, and I think that's where
The opportunity.
exactly. At least that's how I see it, and I'm very passionate about it. Ghana is a small country, um, that can have its structural challenges, but Ghana is not the only African country, and I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential, also outside Ghana on the continent, right? So you see something that works here. It'll be ultra competitive for you to compete here. But then you hit up your friend in Tanzania. I mean, there's some businesses that we've involved ourselves in that were just like that. Say, hey, does this thing work? Does this thing exist in Tanzania? And they'll say no. I say, oh, okay, can we do it? Right. So some of these conversations need to be had across borders. Yeah. I'm very passionate about that. It's not easy, but I think there's a lot of potential in play in that.
What does the future look like for Crown Peak Holdings now moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, keep expanding, keep being opportunistic, doing business, hiring very very good talent to manage, and just keep growing that way. Unfortunately, then again, on this continent, this exiting is an issue. There are a few companies that are able to exit.
It's a huge liquidity event.
Exactly. So you need to be very opportunistic, get into businesses that give you cash.
Yeah,
Cash
you
is king.
exits, you just have cash flow to leverage.
Exactly.
Yeah, a very keen poster on the African continent. Not great work here, but then there's in your portfolio, does this play with in Europe?
The
Where
British
you guys
pharmaceuticals and in the US accounting firms. Yeah.
yeah, use accounting firms.
So yeah, it comes from this class that I teach, right? Entrepreneurship through acquisition. So there are people that will reach out to you and say, "Hey, I'm interested. I found this opportunity in Greece where I'm consolidating pharmaceutical companies. Would you be interested?"
Okay.
And then we have an interest, right? Because it works. And then the accounting firms, same thing. It's like, hey, listen, can we consolidate a bunch of? I mean, the West is very beautiful. It's like, oh, can we consolidate a bunch of small accounting firms and then sell it to a big one? That's it. Just buy small, combine and sell. Something you can do on this continent. So there's also opportunistic place like that, which provides even more geographical diversification and also product diversification. And it's also something that empowers young people.
Yeah. Good. With this thing, right? This strain of like entrepreneurial acquisition. Last year, my friends and I we tried to get this buy a bakery. We went to buy a bakery. And it's been so difficult. It's like I don't. It actually makes sense to me. Okay, well, we have this business, we have capital. We say, okay, well, you have challenge with getting capital. We want to help you scale your business, right? And for some reason, people just don't want to budge. Why? Where is that coming from? Is it cultural?
It's cultural. I mean, these, and it's not just Ghana. In some European countries, they face also this issue. Like Eastern Europe, there's also this element of the same element dynamics that exists here. People, even Asia, people will die with their business. And so, this is it's a lifestyle business. It's what you're known for. Right? Well, you selling your bread company. This is what you're known for. It's what your mother bakes every day. She smells the aroma. It's what she's gonna sell it and do what? Right? So they're gonna die with the business versus sell it to somebody.
Yeah.
There are very tough conversations to have. I don't think we're there yet, but it's beginning to change from what I hear. Because a lot of Africans who want to do such funds here who reach out to me, and I think there's one guy that found Africa is also just a messy place. There's one guy that found a company to buy in a neighboring country, and the guy that he bought a company from, once again showing how difficult it is, he formed another company and took his biggest client, who was 70% of the revenue. So you see a case in our court, right? They have a case in court, and it's messy. This is what I keep telling you about, right? So it's very very difficult to replicate that same model as it is in the US here. So you have to be very opportunistic, like the one that we did with Icy Cup. The university ended up having a stake, quite a big stake as well. Had they didn't have a controlling seat at the board, but it was big enough that they could shape the direction of where the company was going into. Whereas in the US, you just you get rid of the other guy. The other guys want to exit, get rid of them, and you just drive your strategic vision. So that's one of the problems. People still want to have skin in the game, and it becomes a very very difficult business to manage.
I know I saw that the Tree Foundation had made a donation to a million Ghana cedis.
Yeah.
Were you involved in that?
Yeah. So that's my foundation.
Okay.
We are to
What's the goal of that one?
building a classroom block. Yeah. It's something that I'm very passionate about. The next couple of years, towards the end of the year, next year, we've done a few donations. Some of them have. The reason why this one I decided to make it a bit public is because it was the same university that my mother
Okay.
was the first vice chancellor, so there was a bit of an emotional attachment. But a lot of the things that the foundation does is all public.
Quiet.
Yeah,
Why did you set up a foundation?
just to give back in that sense, to give back, and we're trying to do it a bit different, where um like how traditional endowments work. So if this classroom block, I think I need to look at the numbers again, but it will probably cost about 500,000, or it costs about 500,000 to completion, and then the other 500,000 sits um sits in an account, whereby you buy T-bills with the account, and then that's what goes into the maintenance of the building.
Okay.
You just don't do it and leave it as is,
Okay.
for for it to degrade, and because we also have quite a bad maintenance culture in Ghana, so you need to make provisions for that. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah. So so that's like this particular donation, this classroom project. But then on the whole, what's like the objective? I mean, to give back. But like, what's the objective of the foundation? What are you trying to
So to
like where are you
improve
going to? Yeah.
health and education infrastructure,
Okay.
health and education infrastructure, yeah, across the countries that we do businesses in,
Okay.
health and education infrastructure.
Something prompted. It's not prompted. It's
Yeah,
an
I mean,
experience prompted.
yeah.
What's that?
I have a lot of health issues,
Okay.
and every small thing, I run to Switzerland for treatment. There, there's this condition that I have, which, I mean, people get damaged for it. It's something that is so treatable, but people, it's crazy. So these things are very, very solvable, and I think if there's more money that goes into these type of spaces, it just improves everybody's livelihoods.
Okay.
I mean, so that's on the health side. Education side, obviously, I'm super interested in education as well,
Yeah.
and I think money going into that space from the private sector also improves the livelihoods of people. A lot of it is also based on the economics research that we do.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many papers about for instance, providing sanitary pads to girls and how that reduces dropout rates. So many things. How reducing delinquency amongst teachers in schools improves the outcomes of the students tremendously. There's a lot of research papers on that. So a lot of the things that we do is also based on some of this very good research work that has been done in economics. Yeah.
Talking about economics and education, you mentioned that you did a PhD particularly because your dad, just to make him happy. Your dad aside,
Primarily.
primarily, your dad aside, you, with the career path you decided to take and the work you're doing, was there any need for it?
No, there wasn't any. I mean, yeah.
So would you advise me, for example?
I don't think so. Unless you want to do, there's what makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
For me, this made me happy. I mean, the day I was doing my defense and seeing my dad, my mother, and how happy they were, I cried, and I haven't cried in a very long time. So it's what makes you happy. It was worth it.
Aside that currency fluctuation.
Yeah, exactly. That one, it wasn't even tears. It was like you were crying in your stomach. You're like, shit. But this one, I actually shed tears. Because it was a very happy moment for me, just seeing my parents. It's like they're super happy.
Yeah.
So I think it's what gives you utility, and this gave me utility. With that being said, I'm doing some very, very interesting work
Okay.
in economics. It's part of my thesis. It's part of future work, which I think can add value to society and how we understand business, how we understand credit, um, in Africa, in emerging markets.
Are you still optimistic about the African continent, economically speaking?
I am. I am. Not as much as I used to, before I came here. I am. I think there's a lot of structural challenges. Um, that is not just peculiar to Ghana, you know. But we have such a young population base, which governments should really tap into the energy of the youth.
Yeah.
That can go really bad if governments fail to do so. African governments that fail to do so, it's gonna be a lot of anarchy. You have young people that are unemployed, young men that are unemployed. They've been told you go to school, you do X, Y, and Z, you check these boxes, you have a job. And you do that and you don't have a job. People are gonna be frustrated. So the governments need to tap into the energy of the young people. I think for me, every African country I go into, I see this is the biggest national security issue they have, is how to tap into the energy of the youth. It's gonna be a mess. I mean, you have millions of people who are about to turn 18. They're going to university in 4 years. They're gonna come out of college. They're gonna be without jobs. For every African government, this is a very, very serious problem. It's not just peculiar to Ghana.
Yeah. See, what makes you happy?
Family.
What you do?
Family is very, very important for me. So
Yeah.
validation from family, not from friends, but from family is quite important to me.
That's because of what you said about your whole PhD thing. I get that you're married.
Yeah.
As a young man, I typically have these conversations with friends who are building businesses and they're building phase, heavily building, and I get mixed feedback about marriage and how, on the one end, we say, oh, we'll slow you down, take your time, just try and do what you can do, take all the risks now before you get married. On another front, it's like, oh, it's the best that could ever happen to you within your journey and your trajectory as an entrepreneur. Having someone who believes in you is going to back you, yada, 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 yada.
Right.
What has marriage done for you? What's your take on marriage?
If you find the right person, is amazing. The chance of you finding the right person is very low. And that's why a lot of people end up in the situation they're in. Look, find the right person it's extremely rare. So it's not gonna work out for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is the honest truth. A lot of people cry. You gotta hear people are suffering in their marriages. So if you're lucky, if you want to play those odds and count on luck and you find the right person, it'd be great for you. But yeah, if you don't too, you're screwed.
Yeah. Anyway, would you success? At what point would you say that? Or let me just ask it this way: what does success mean to you? What does success mean to you?
Yeah.
In all your pursuits, in all that you're doing, what does success mean to you?
I think it's seeing, being able to impact different lives, right? So from start to finish, who you bring on board, and how you leave them. You should be visibly be able to see that, listen, I've improved people. Under leadership, people were able to get married, people were able to have family, people were able to go and pursue masters at top universities, people were able to fulfill their dreams working for you. That's what gives, that's how I define success. It's more people centric. And at times it doesn't work out that way. That is life. Sometimes people get upset. I think people just understand that's life. Not everything that you do pans out. Failure is something that every person will face at some point in their lives. If you haven't faced already, it's just bound to happen. But this is what I look forward to in every venture that I do.
We were talking yesterday. I asked whether you were a person of faith, right? Whether you have faith in the divine. And I asked this because there's a certain correlation I'm beginning to pick up from people who sit where you're seated in these conversations, that there's almost always a certain commitment to the divine, right? And attributing a lot of things to the spiritual, so to speak. What's your take on that? What's role that spirituality and God play
Yeah,
in what you do?
yeah. No, I mean, you know, so without what I believe, God, I'm Christian, so I believe in Jesus. So I'll just interchange the two. You're not going to have your peace of mind. And there's also a lot of research, economics research into this. When I was in the States, I wasn't as spiritual. Okay. When you come to this continent, because in the States and Switzerland, I'm not as spiritual when I go to Switzerland, although I have to, but yeah, I go to church once in a while. Don't pray as often. Um, it's just the way it is. Things work. Things work in the country. If I'm sick today, I know I go to hospital, the doctor's gonna be able to diagnose me, I get pretty good treatment. If I need X, Y, and Z, things work. But when you come here, you realize things are out of your control. So over there, things are more in your control. You wake up today, the train is not gonna be late. It's gonna be there too. Here, everything is unpredictable. I think that's the spirituality element of it. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but for me, it's more of a selfish reason. It keeps you sane. Because then God is in control. But here you're not in control. In 2022, when the currency was fucking us all over, where are you gonna take solace? The currency wasn't fucking me over in Switzerland. Swiss franc was amazing. Steady. All my money there, steady. Currency here was fucking us over left and right. So I was here. So that's where I think spirituality is very, very important for African. That's how about there has to be a God that is in charge of all of this, that is sitting somewhere making sense out of all the craziness that we face here.
Yeah.
Ghana ha and then Kabia says kwanche na wadanfo bi akunya accident wu. Abi jibi semen kwa. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
There has to be something that makes sense out of all of this. It's so unpredictable. You see what I mean? It's so unpredictable from a business standpoint. The BBAC, and the whole thing, your whole investment goes to shit. It also happens in the West, but the West is a bit more predictable. You're not going to have these crazy currency fluctuations that we have on the continent, and I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
To have. I mean, it's a bit selfish to say, but being a rational human being, you need to have this element to be sane doing business here.
Death.
Mm-hmm.
How do you process it?
So your time is up. You're gone.
Personally, with all you're doing, you're building great businesses, microcredit, financial services, real estate. You have the biggest hub of franchises, restaurants in the country. You're a very young man. How are you thinking about that? That one day it might come to an end, physically speaking. I mean,
yeah, you never know. Could be today, could be tomorrow. It could be 30 years from now. So at the end of the day, you're going back to your maker. Me believing in Jesus, you're going to be held accountable for your life here on earth. And hopefully I'm able to, I've made mistakes. I'm not a perfect human being. I've made a shit ton of mistakes. But hopefully when I account to my maker, you can say that, okay, you led a good life and you're in my good books. That's how I see it. But, dying there, it's something that everybody, you believe in God too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to die to go to heaven. So I remember let me tell you this funny story. When I was going through my health issues at my PhD, it was a very, very bizarre moment. And, I had a pastor call me and, he knows how some of these pastors are. And they will, me, I never quite me, sure. They will not say this, absolutely. And I miss you,
Yeah.
what's your beef? Yeah, I'm gonna die. I'll go and die and I'll be with him.
Yeah.
After all, what we've been promised there is better than all the pain and misery we are going through here. So it's kosher for me. If this is what God has revealed to you, then so be it. It's not really gonna change my perspective. Die and you at some point you come and meet me there too. So I don't think people should fear. There's a lot of fear that's put into people about that. You have to die to go. As a Christian, you have to die to go to heaven. And this earth is a very painful earth. People suffer, especially in that part of the world. People die over, hundreds of thousands of people still die over a stupid disease like malaria, which shouldn't be happening in this day and age. And I think it's still the biggest killer. Malaria still is. Like a few 100,000 people die every year. So many stupid things going on. So if you're gonna die and go and meet your maker, you might as well.
Yeah.
It's not something that you should fear. You should just make sure you're in the good books.
Yeah.
And you're in the good grace of God. God has mercy on you when you die and you go and meet your maker. That's how I see these things.
Personally for me, there's a lot of wisdom splurged all over the conversation we've had for me. And like I've actually asked you in parts what your words would be for an entrepreneur like me who's trying to build similar businesses like you're building. But I would like us to collate in one at this point, like a lump, right? And if you could tell me something now as an entrepreneur and as a human being, but as a brother, as a friend, word of advice, what would it be? Anything.
I'll say try to be a good human being. It's not, the world is just a very challenging world wherever you are, especially in an African context. Try and be a good human being. It's not as easy, and people have very different expectations of you. Try and do your best. Somebody, you can go and talk to somebody and say, "Oh, Kobe screwed me here." In their perspective, that's what happened. You try and be a human being so that in your own conscience, you tried your best. Just try and be a good human being. Mentor people well, be honest with people. That's what people want, and that's what people appreciate. And just try your best between yourself and your God. You've done your best. If you didn't meet somebody's expectations, so be it. But at least you've done your best. You just have to try and be a good human being. I think that's what I always try to do, and I always tell young people also to try to do. Try and be a good human being. I mean, a lot of, I was reading the news the other day. You heard of this NSS scandal?
Yeah.
Whether if it's true, I mean, this is crazy. 100 million cities. You lose a lot. You try and be a good human being. You try to be a good human being. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't even want to do. So I think that's what everybody should strive to do. You're not an island in yourself, by yourself. We live in a community where your life impacts other people. I'm sure you impact a lot of people. You have brothers, you have families, you have friends. Today, God forbid you weren't around, they'll be affected in a lot of ways. You just have to try and be a good human to impact people's lives.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kobe.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. It's been a good conversation. I was telling you yesterday, and I've said on this conversation like a lot of times that you and I are just excited about the same line of businesses, and so you're more like an inspiration to me, making me aware that it's possible. What you're doing, you're breaking a lot of grounds, making that ground softer. Because this ET thing, probably one of the pioneers of this continent.
Yeah. I'm usually credited for it in Africa.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Great work, and all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you as well. Let me know if you need anything too.
Sure. Let me know if I can help you with anything at all.
Would do.
Yes.
Would do.
So, all the best. So, friends, community in Accra and the world beyond. A great conversation with Mr. Dr. Kobbina Awuah. So, as the matchup remains, just build something. You do it.